It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday, and I keep dancing in my chair and bouncing my camera. I apologize to the people that drives crazy. Sorry, Eileen. I know it drives poor Eileen crazy when my camera bounces. Lots of content this week. You may see Momo's paw occasionally come into frame. Momo's in my lap. Oh, he's not going to lift paw on cue. Okay, he's sitting in my lap. I'm sitting here cross-legged because he wanted to take a nap right now. But lots of good feedback this week. The video on intersectionality did not go completely to shit. Huzzah! Go team! If you like this sort of stuff, we can talk about stuff. There's a lot of really good feedback coming. Help support this channel, either monthly support, become a monthly patron at patreon.com/LeannaK. One extra video a week where I get into more like what's going on with the game, what's going on with my life, all that just general rambling insanity. Or one-time donations, coffee.com/LeannaK. We need one more coffee this week to keep up our pace of subsidized Leanna Cares clients. Oh man, was it a good Leanna Cares week this week? Oh man, every week's good, but this week was like moments. People had moments, and you know, whatever, when somebody goes, I took your advice on something, I'm like, uh-oh, did it go well? And two people, it went well, and so they had that win, and I'm like, yay, I'm so excited. So on to your feedback. One says right off the top that it's off topic, but I think it's a fair thing. It's a fair question, and so I'm going to answer it. Totally off topic, but don't you think it's a little irresponsible on your part to share in such a carefree manner ways in which malevolent people could potentially assassinate you? They basically say they'd have to be on the psychological level of a Saturday morning cartoon villain like Skeletor. But if life taught me one thing, that is reality is oftentimes much weirder than fiction. Fair question. The thing is, it already happened. There have been multiple waves of bizarre Skeletor-like character assassination that have gone on with me. And because it's already happened, it's like I have nothing to lose now. If people are just going to make crap up about me, I might as well put it here on the record that anybody who is interested can find. And I personally think that if I take some risks and, you know, share what I'm comfortable sharing, err on the side of authenticity and transparency, even if that, you know, sacrifices some self-defense, I hope that it'll give other people a feeling that they can screw up as much as I can in public and still be okay. That's basically it. But, you know, it's a bit cheeky, but that's sort of the core of it. The most resilient online personalities, I think, are the ones that have an audience that allows them to be complex in more than one thing at once. So hopefully that answers your question. There would be a much longer version, but I want to get to the other stuff. Because the RPG conversation so went way beyond my expectations in terms of the way people engaged with it. And there are too many comments for me to read here. We talked about it some on Twitch as well. Here's just a smattering, okay, of the different opinions. Smattering is an excellent word. Okay. Right now, I think that the only video games that should still be called RPGs are the ones explicitly based on a tabletop RPG mechanic or its derivatives, such as D&D, Pathfinder, or GURPS, looking at Fallout, the good ones. It also is not the fault of RPGs that other games keep stealing the ideas from them. After all, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Okay, moving on. As someone who played a lot of RPGs as a kid, I have very little time for them now. It's been a while since I've watched your YouTube. Love the topic. I think you're right that game labels are messed up. RPG is a very loose term, to be honest. At least today, I think every game label is very loosely defined these days. There's a lot of overlap. I think there's too many variations of RPGs. You need to mix stuff with them to define your game. Turn-based action RPG, Western RPG, MMORPG. The problem also arises when you go with the literal definition of RPG RPG, role-playing games. By that definition, any casual gamer is going to be like, I role-play as characters in all games. Action games have RPG elements and skill trees. Turn-based games have action elements or quick-time events. Story-focused games can be RPGs and linear. They can be expansive and have branching paths. So I think people need to define games better. What an RPG is can be loosely defined. Take Batman Arkham City. It's an action RPG with third-person action and a puzzle-solving rhythm game, but also a superhero title. How do you define that? Technically, it's not even stat-based. It just has an overall Batman level where you upgrade your skills to buff your character. But no one can call it an RPG, so I don't know. It's complicated. That was like the way my brain churned on it. Another one. The problem is that people are trying to define what an RPG is by listing some kind of inherent characteristic. It's too micro, low level, when really we should be thinking macro, high level. What caused this RPG distinction to exist in the first place? What causes the type of audience it attracts due to doing something that stands out? What's the driving force idea behind the game that causes these mechanics to be the way they are? I also don't think we should think in requirements, but conventions. A JRPG typically has X characteristics, and the more it has to them to a certain degree and the more it focuses on them, the more likely it's called a JRPG. Interesting, creating like a spectrum dynamic. Genres are about cultural evolution and developments. We identify and make distinctions on things according to what is culturally practical. The same object could be called a knife in one context and a weapon in another. It's also much about culture, history, the actual content. It's about what was based on or developed on what its audience ended up making a distinction for. RPGs in video games is simply an umbrella of genres whose roots lie in tabletop role-playing games, especially D&D, or have a lot of characteristics people associate with RPGs. So basically, this commenter got to the same place as the first commenter, but in a very different way. And the comment went on for a while, but I thought it was interesting that they sort of landed in the same place, but this idea of what is the purpose, I found a fascinating way to say it. Another person on Twitch, I just wanted to summarize their comment, said that in order for it to be an RPG, it must both have like playing a character elements, but also some sort of stat leveling. So it's not either or, it's both. I found that interesting too, but that is also the same way of saying it's a game based on the mechanics of D&D, AD&D, Pathfinder, GURPS, so on and so forth. I actually have a GURPS manual back. Come on, Momo disconnected my microphone. Sorry about that. I mentioned owning a GURPS manual and my mic unplugged. Good job, Momo. Good boy. Okay, way to keep things interesting. So moving on to, maybe he just wanted to pull the cable before we go to the topic of intersectionality. Though this was interesting. I'm just gonna again go and read comments. I have more sort of commentary at the end of this, and then we'll end on some Wellness Wednesday comments, because I think coming in for a landing on something more heartfelt and personal, or as many people brought up in the comics, individualist, is a good way to land on this one, because this topic is so inherently charged. And again, I really, really appreciate the people who were cool about it. There was one person who attacked me based on immutable characteristics and claimed it was satire. I didn't kick them, but I did warn them that if they did that to any other commenter, anybody but me, it would be a violation of the channel rules. So just putting that out there as a reminder. There's been some new people of late. Say what you want about me. Don't pull that crap on commenters, on other commenters. I would prefer you didn't attack things I can't do anything about, but it's YouTube, right? One person said to start off I thought this was a good place to start with intersectionality. In other words, and especially when someone has a fair point, they should not become so self-righteous that they make themselves insufferable, lest their words be regarded as so much air. Good place to start, right? Good rule. Good rule. Good rule for life. Would it be helpful if we came up with a clearer identifier for those that use intersectionality in bad faith, or perhaps more descriptively, ones that use intersectionality without understanding the intent. I'm thinking post-intersectional or new intersectional, NU. I've got no beef with post-grunge or new metal, but the prefixes just seem apt. I thought that was interesting. Post-intersectional or new intersectional. I will ponder that. I might actually start. I like new metal, the name. I don't know if it translates to speaking, but I mean it's the same way I use the term outrage warrior instead of, you know, social justice warrior, or I forget the moral crusader. It's an umbrella term for both extremes of the culture war. It's different talking points, but they're both doing the same thing. And so I agree. I'm good with, if anybody's got a suggestion for that term, because I don't know, you know, as somebody who creates things, I just don't like seeing someone's idea misappropriated, applied in places that, you know, at least Kimberly Crenshaw had no intention of it ever going. There's plenty of interviews where she's like, what intersectionality? Because if you're talking outside the law, it's not mine. So yeah, give me your suggestions on this. One person said, while watching, I couldn't help wondering if all the negativity in the gaming press is a form of bullying. There's an accepted image, and from what I've seen from history, people will put a lot of effort into maintaining the status quo, even if it's actually easier to just change the systems and assumptions. That's an interesting thing, because I don't think it's intentionally bullying, but, and I say this a lot, but the games press historically, you know, I used to be a member of it. I guess I still am, but I don't get direct access the same way anymore. I'd love it if I did, but got blacklisted. But it is a form of bullying, and the sooner they recognize that just because you're a victim of bullying doesn't mean you can't also be a perpetrator of bullying, the better. Right? You know, the strike got resolved apparently after 4 days. No big fanfare when they settled, huh? Weird. But, okay. So now everybody knows you're like the real deal now. You have a union job with like security and guaranteed pay raises and healthcare and everything like that. Start fucking acting like it. Make sense? Makes sense. Okay. One person said, I see intersectionality as a tool like a loaded handgun. There are uses for this tool, and there are people who can use it safely and responsibly. Unfortunately, none of them are on Twitter. Okay. If someone wanted to have a conversation about intersectionality, I would be fine about that. Unfortunately, the why do I keep saying intersectional community doesn't appear to be about conversation right now. They are about demands and name calling. I had enough of that during school. Now I'm older, and calling me a name to get me to fall in line doesn't work anymore. That was a common comment. And the next comment is, I have a lot of issues talking about legal things on my channel because I'm Canadian and we use the British common law system, which functions fundamentally differently than the US system. We have a reasonable person standard to our law. The US is more about interpreting what the writers of the law intended, especially when it comes to constitutional law. Very, very different. And so you get things like this. Your comment about how the judge should have applied the law, how it was meant versus how it was written. That debate has been going on for a very long time. If judges focus too much on the text of the law, there can be a miscarriage of justice. Your Honor, it wasn't jaywalking because I was using a wheelchair. I'm not sure that'll work. On the flip side, if the judge focuses too much on what the law was meant to apply to, that can be used to justify any ruling and makes it impossible for anyone to apply that law without researching lots of cases. Your Honor, the law was, as written, was meant to apply to ships, which are floating objects. My client was wearing floaties and is therefore a ship. Poor example, but I'm too tired for a better one. Yeah, this is a thing about U.S. law. Then we got into the whole thing of, and we come back to this a lot, and it's very real, and so I'm going to be gentle about it. Basically, these people hurt me. Why should I listen? The big bucket of comments of intersectionality has been used to hurt me. That's why I reject it. I get that. And the idea of people used a bunch of different metaphors as if something has been weaponized against you, you don't care that it's not the weapon's fault. I validate that, okay? That's a very real feeling. I have had to get past that stuff in my own life. I would not be able to deal with a lot of people. I mean, I won't get into details, but there's a lot of different representatives of groups, especially groups leaning sort of right or anti-SJW, that did some really nasty shit to me. Talked about it. I just felt like I'm not going to practice guilt by association, right? I know, say Jordan Peterson stuff. I know some people who feel like they got real comfort from his stuff. I know the sources that he's pulling from. I think those sources explain it better than he does. But maybe people haven't been exposed to those sources and therefore, that helped them. Am I going to say, no, I don't want to hear about anything involving Jordan Peterson? I already made a rules for life joke, right? Because that stuff has been weaponized against me. I choose not to do that, right? That's a personal choice, but I'm just giving the other side to that. It is not healthy to live in pain forever. It is not healthy to constantly fear being poked, if you will, because you were poked in the past. Man, Beelzebub went through my head, and with the right person, being poked can be fun, puppets. It's a journey, it's a process. Everybody hits different things at different times. This is the sort of thing that Leanna Care Service was set up to help people through, because everything's very specific. Back to the breaking down. Complicating vectors on intersectionality. I'm like, yay, complications. I love complications. Let's dig in. 1, categories aren't universal. Simply being in a category might give one a higher probability of having a certain challenge. However, it isn't guaranteed. While we can average across groups to gain some insight, we should be careful not to engage in destroying the exception. This criticism seems to be pretty core to right-wing critiques of intersectionality, particularly from conservative minorities themselves. Well, sure. Again, that works outside the law. Within the law, if it's a discrimination case, it is not a question of probability. It's can you prove discrimination, right? 2, not all categories are equally valid. It goes without saying that pedophilia and homosexuality are completely different concepts. I get what this commenter is saying, but thanks to certain things in U.S. politics right now, no, it no longer goes without saying that those are different things. Everything is grooming now. So just my point of frustration, I get what you're saying, commenter. It's just everything's going to shit because people aren't assuming that, right? However, they both create categories of people. Simply being in a category that might be oppressed doesn't invalidate the oppression. Okay, this is where it's like, they use the example of being prevented from molesting children isn't a form of oppression, and it isn't an alternative sexual identity. Yes, because there's no consent. If things actually protect other people, that's not oppression. The same way going to jail for murder isn't oppression. There are ways, there are guardrails here, right? They say, homosexuals, and they use a word, but transgender people being abused, that's a real issue that needs to be dealt with. But others are reasonable oppressions. They bring up like punishing murderers and rapists. That's not oppression. That's paying your debt to society. The whole idea of oppression is you did nothing wrong and you're having liberties and freedoms and things like that taken away. Not the same thing. This is why, okay, bring it up because, yes, we're talking about a major issue I see with intersectionality is the assumption that all hierarchical structures should be equalized and torn down. This isn't necessarily a good idea, and this facet is often trivialized. While I would like the world to be better for everyone, the truth is that some problems really are intractable, and attempting to solve them could create more problems and worse ones. That doesn't mean that any specific oppression ought to stand unchallenged, only that isn't a guarantee that ought to be challenged either. I would prefer we look at intersectional structures piecemeal and ask, can this be improved, and what are the potential risks and mitigation strategies for altering, removing these social structures, which Kimberly Crenshaw has said herself. Something along that line. The idea of a completely equal society is an ideal, a platonic one. We will probably never reach that. But like you said, we should try where we can. That's all we can do, right? 3, frequently intersectionality is derived from CRT's, critical race theory, has a very moralistic prerogative, particularly in regards to 2. Many will try to argue that the simple creation of a social category is automatically grounds for an accusation of oppression. This largely comes from the Marxian root of a lot of these ideas. And that's, oh man. If I thought it was worth it and I could tie it into gaming, I actually have a brief thing in my lecture on gender as systems in gameplay design. To try to get people to stop thinking about gender as signifiers and actually think of how does gender work in your fictional world, right? I dive briefly into the fact that Marxism became part cynical sales pitch when Engels went out and sold it to people. I talk about this all the time, but that sales pitch is what created these, and it's interesting because if intersectionalism existed when Engels was going around, a lot of this flattening wouldn't have happened because, for instance, first wave feminism had these fractures in it because there were the noble women, the wives of landowners who wanted to be able to vote because their husbands could vote. And then there were the working class women whose husband couldn't vote because they didn't own property worth enough money to vote. So they didn't give a damn about voting. They wanted to be able to keep their own money and have better workplace conditions and all that stuff. Well, the thing that first wave feminism got known for was suffrage. The minorities' concern. Instead of recognizing that, no, just because the wives of landowners and working class women are both women doesn't mean they share the same concerns. That's intersectionality. So yes, Marxism predated intersectionality. Intersectionality used Marxist frameworks in places, but intersectionality actually proved a lot of the problems with the way Marxism is gone is that everything is a class. So you know what gets neglected? Socioeconomic class. I was talking to somebody that, the surest way to solve a lot of these issues is poverty reduction strategies. It won't solve like raw discrimination stuff, but it'll sure solve a lot of the problems where poverty and bigotry intersect by dealing with the poverty element. Get people stabilized, and then because that'll help people with disabilities, that'll help trans people who are more likely to live in poverty, that will help, LGBTQ youth who get kicked out of their houses, that'll help black and brown people who don't have the intergenerational wealth, so on and so forth. But no, because everybody wants to talk about identifiers, missing the class bit of class. Anyway, this commenter said, I advocate to demarx intersectionality. There you go. It can be done. One person said, just want to thank you for finally explaining what intersectionality is. Yes, I was one of those people who just assumed it was white man bad and black woman good. This is not for lack of asking what it meant. Back in the 20-teens, I would often ask what the other term meant, but got the I don't have enough time to explain it to you, go educate yourself, which later became I don't want to talk to you bigot line. At some point, I just went, fuck it. This is why I make videos like this, because I cannot stand go educate yourself. That's a terrible idea on the internet. Dr. Google. Facebook shit about everything. Don't tell people to educate yourself. They'll get their heads full of crap. I do not understand that theory at all. If I drop some take on a concept like this, I am more than happy if I have the time to talk to people about it. If they're assholes, I will snark. But, as long as people are chill, I have no problem trying to explain it to people. Then we, more stuff on harm. One person took this in a different direction, and I thought, okay, again, sometimes kind of getting to the same place, but saying it a different way is useful. If gamers are largely intersectional, but they don't like to call it that word, what does it matter? To the advocate, the word shouldn't matter more than the message behind it. So these people trying to put intersectionality in the space should be congratulatory on this sort of realization and move on, rather than take offense to push back against the word and declare those who don't bow to their prescriptivism as the enemy. Not to suggest you're doing the latter. Not sure why it matters to me either, since I at least somewhat acknowledge this. Because I want to take the fear out of the equation. I want to explain to people what intersectionalism really originated as. The same way I tend to go to bat for Derek Bell, who's the critical race theorist you don't see a lot of people online. They isolate a few out of context statements of his, and he was the first black dean of law or something like that at Harvard. Could have just been first black professor. But anyway, black lawyer at Harvard, had some interesting things to say. The thing that drives me crazy about the way all these things are taken, all these things are treated, is they take 2 or 3 admittedly bad takes and use that to define an entire person by it. And I find that so strange because, when people do that to sacred cows, like, say, Jordan Peterson, who has said some utterly inadvisable things in public, like the term enforced monogamy, right? And got sensationalized by a newspaper and so on and so forth. That's not fair because people know the greater body of his work. Well, if you don't think that's fair, then you also have to apply that to the people you disagree with. And I don't like throwing out good ideas because somebody might have had a bad one occasionally. We've all done it, especially those of us who make this sort of content for a living. We all fuck up sometimes. Do you want to be judged only by your fuck ups? No? Well, then don't judge other people by that standard. Because if... And this is the problem. I think a lot of people in gaming do feel like they've been judged only by their fuck ups. Life doesn't have to be that way. That's not healthy. So don't perpetuate the cycle. There is another way. Like I said, I'm here fucking up all the time. You guys keep watching, which means you think I also have some good ideas, right? It's like playing a From Software game. I mean, if I don't look back at some old ideas and kind of go, oh, it was a little off the mark, means I'm not evolving, means I'm not learning, right? That's why it matters to me. I want to take the fear. I want to take this sense of being under siege away from people. Are there other alternate methodologies that work just as well to a lot of critical race theory principles? Yeah, I use more straight up anthropological frameworks in my own work. Just I try to avoid anything that derives from storytelling and anecdotal narrative. That's just my comfort. I get the purposes of it, but I find that the alternate narrative storytelling elements of modern critical race theory are the ones that sort of ran off with the horses they begun. That kind of dominated, and sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes it replaces actual data, and problem. That being said, I don't think we should be afraid of theoretical frameworks because it's just a theoretical framework, right? That's like being afraid of a blueprint. It's a blueprint. If somebody builds a house that's unsafe, well, that's a problem. But the blueprint wasn't the problem. It was the construction. And are there some bad models? Sure, there are some bad models. But no model is perfect. And you have to be aware of the flaws in the model to use them as effective tools. And so, intersectionality has its limitations. It has its place that it applies. It has its place where it has no place. A lot of people brought up individualism versus, intersectionalism. That what I'm describing sounds like individualism. To attain a term like intersectionalism. And this is where I wish I want to live in that world. Okay, I want to live in that world. But when you are going in and talking to things like game companies, they don't listen to individualism. You need other cards to play. You need other tools to use, right? You need a compelling buffet of data to make them go towards the light instead of go towards the dark, right? And I think one of the most toxic things that has happened in terms of game development is the idea that men want things and women want things when 25% of each gender is not sex typical. This guy right here, not sex typical. And instead of recognizing shit, that's 25% of the population. But hey, based on what we know about gamers, it's probably a lot higher in gamers because it's a safe solitary activity. There's probably a lot of men that play games who are not sex typical. And that immediately breaks the model of men want this, women want this, right? But without anything that looks like intersectionality, call it what you want, that's what they do. That's the whole problem. Men, women, all same. Why you no like game, woman? Abby, you should like women in it. Play game, shut up. That's the thinking that happens, right? Same thing. Oh, this is catering to men. What are you complaining about? No, it doesn't work that way unless you have all people do not relate to their gender or their sex the same goddamn way. And unfortunately, too many game companies still think in those giant useless buckets. So there we go. And so those negative reactions, again, that's why I'm so cautious about it, because a lot of developers shut out player feedback the minute things get spicy. And it's really hard not to. when people are just screaming at you and calling you names and saying untrue things about you, it's the saying untrue things about you that take life. And at that point, you just go, you know what? None of you are ever gonna fucking believe me. So fuck you. Every person who is in game dev for any length of time has done that once as a survival trait. Because it's happened to all of us, right? The problem is, unless you come out of that bunker mentality, you have cut yourself off to feedback. You have cut yourself off to what your player base wants because of that bad experience. You have to come back to the table at some point. And that will be easier if gamers start feeling less under threat and less feeling the need to lash out because they've been attacked. It's like this cycle of intergenerational trauma now in gaming, going back to the dawn of the original fucking Xbox, or at least Xbox Live, right? It's like we keep passing the shit around and then wonder why everything smells. And you know, the truth is 18% of the population is controlling this sort of cultural discourse. That's the people who are very active on social media and are very politically polarized. And each side, you know, the left and the right accounts for about half of that. So single digit by population factions, 9% on each side, are controlling this shit. I don't like that minority rules situation. That is crap. And again, you know, we get these frameworks. We use the frameworks. We can ignore the fucking smears because we have frameworks that we can explain and stick to, and we have data that we can explain and replicate. And that's the only way to effectively fight off the bullshit. There's no way around it. And you guys may know, you may notice, I actually care about, and it's not just that I care about games, because I hit the point where I'm like, fuck it, I'm tired of just trying to influence. I'm going to make my own, because I'm not being listened to. I'm not being heard. Fuck this shit. I care about you guys. I care about the gamers. I see all the damn hurt that's out there, and it seems so unnecessary because you regular commenters, you have your ups and downs. I see the good in you. I see that you're good people, you know, and you don't deserve to feel this under siege. And if I can do anything to lessen that, I'm going to try, even if it comes out the way sometimes and wrong way and you guys get pissed at me. Like, I'm going to keep trying. Because that's not right. You know, that's not fair. That's not right. And you guys know I just try to give you tools. I'm not telling you what to think. I don't terribly care if you agree with me as long as you're cool about the disagreement. Like, I read a lot of disagreement today, right? I just want some of the pain to lessen. Because this shit's supposed to be fun. Soapbox done? Soapbox done. Okay, there are, by the way, if anybody needs one-on-one sessions, there are some Leanna Cares slots still available. I have opened up limited appointments beyond Wednesdays and Thursdays, if that's an issue. But yeah, the form's in the description box if you want to sign up. And also, you know what's going to happen. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Extra video a week for patrons. Or buy someone a Leanna Care session who really needs it. Because there's a lot of people going through this culture war stuff and are damaged by it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Have a very great weekend. And play some video games and have some fun. Thanks for watching.